Okay. So you might be wondering what that was, and you also might be wondering what this is. So I'll answer both questions here for you. That is what you get when you do a YouTube search for upbeat royalty-free music at 11:54 p.m. on a Saturday night, just trying to get a little bit of intro music for a wacky little bonus show. What this is a throwback tribute, whatever you want to call it, to the good old days of sitting around, at early morning on Sundays and listening to the weekly top 40, which I have recently become aware is still a thing. I You could have knocked me over with a feather when I discovered that Rick D still does a weekly top 40. I'm but anywho, that was the theory that I took into this week's bonus show. So as I've noted, and is painfully obvious when you listen to my other shows, I don't watch a lot of modern wrestling. I tend to be mostly focused on shit that is almost, in one case, is almost as old as me, and one which is older than me. So yeah, so I figured, hey, what would be interesting if I watched the main event segment of the 7 nationally televised pro wrestling shows that are out there, and I counted them down in order purely of pure enjoyment, from 7 to 1. And I dropped it on Sunday, and even though this probably isn't actually going to drop at 7 a.m., come up with a nice alliterative name like the top 7 at 7. So that's what we're going to do here. And if you like it, hate it, despise it, love it, let me know. And, I can't promise that this will ever happen again. It may just be a one time, one day only thing, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see what the feedback is, and we'll go from there. And I'm sure someone will say, hey, if I listen to feedback, I wouldn't be doing this show right now. And to that I say, ha ha. Now, each main event segment, and I make sure to stress the word segment, is because, you don't always have a match in your last segment, even though 6 of the 7 shows do, in fact, have a main event match. At the end, I rate it purely based on my own personal enjoyment of that particular segment, match, angle, whatever happens there at the end. Now, of course, you may, greatly disagree with this, and you may think, I am greatly underrating or overrating something, and hey, that's your prerogative. No shame in your game. If you like something, great. If you don't like something, great. The world would be boring if we all had the same opinion about everything, you know? So let's dive in here and to show you just how little advanced work I've done apparently for you know, the production of this particular show. I didn't bother to get like some sort of wacky audio going, number 7. So maybe I'll just like do that on my own. Number 7. So, number 7, NXT, April 23rd, 2024. It begins with several NXT alumnus, including Pete Dunne, Tyler Bate, and Johnny Gargano, coming through the crowd to watch the main event. Sarah Schreiber stops Ilja Dragunov to the ring to ask his thoughts. He vows to win. Damian Priest walked up and wished him luck. Byron Saxton then asked Trick Williams for his thoughts, and Trick said if he doesn't win tonight, he's a bust. He fears no man and will whoop that Trick. So that leads us to the main event of NXT. NXT champion Ilja Dragunov versus Trick Williams. I okay, I'm gonna say this might have a lot to do with the fact that I don't watch NXT legitimately. Like before this match, and I want to point out, I did not watch like any somebody maybe like with their jaws dropping down. I did not watch 7 wrestling shows this week. I watched 7 main events. So I just want to state that I did not watch the first hour and 54 minutes of NXT. I did not watch the first 2.5 hours of Raw, etc. I just watched the end. So with that said, um, you know, I haven't really watched NXT since they changed it back to being, as close to a strictly developmental show as they were going to do with the NXT 2.0 stuff. And I mean, this is probably one of those times where, someone goes, hey, maybe you should watch it. Maybe I should, but, again, too much good wrestling to sit and watch developmental wrestling. Sorry. So I noted it was 9:54 when the bell rang, so this is not going to be a very long match. Alicia Taylor, who's the ring announcer, had her hair spiked up to the point where she was the tallest person in the ring, including both wrestlers, the referee, I'm sure whatever cameramen were in there. She was the tallest. They tell us that Trick's mom is in the hospital. Wish her nothing but a speedy recovery. They were not pacing at the bell for a long match as both men were going at each other quickly. Ilja used a Constantine special for a near fall and then almost immediately hit a power bomb. They weirdly hugged each other before exchanging strikes, and Ilja hit a knee that sent us to commercials. So I guess we're having an overrun here. Fast forward 2.5 minutes, Ilja went for a sunset flip power bomb, and they did not come off the ropes right, and Trick fell right on top of Ilja's head. That could not have felt good at all. Ilja came off the top rope, and I have no idea what actually happened, except both men fell down, and Ilja was selling. Okay. Trick used the diving uppercut, which apparently was Ilja's move for a 2 count. Ilja clears off the announce desk, which hopefully doesn't no-sell moves tonight, because we'll get to what happened on Raw. But Trick ended up getting the better of it and hit a Uranagi to Ilja off the dasher boards through the table. Ilja used the same diving punch to the face that Trick did earlier, but the announcers and apparently nobody I've ever heard talk about this match picked up on it. Ilja did one from the top rope and hurt his hand and fist, so Trick kicked out of the cover. Trick basically kicked him and then won with what I think Vic called a trick shot to win the title. In my opinion, this match was not that good, but the crowd was so incredibly into it that it made it enjoyable. After the match, Ilja gave the belt to Trick and hugged him, and I gave it an enjoyment rating. Again, own personal enjoyment. I gave it an enjoyment rating of 3.0 out of 10. From there, we go to number 6. Impact. TNA Impact, April 25th, 2024. Nick Nemeth, the former Dolph Ziggler versus Eddie Edwards, with Brian Myers and Alicia Edwards in his corner. Ryan Nemeth was shown at ringside. The rest of Nick's family, aka his father, did not show up for this one. Fast-paced opening with Nemeth going for a super kick early, but Alicia grabbed his ankle while the referee ran out of his way to turn his back on this. Anywho, that allowed Eddie to take over. Later on, Alicia slapped Nick, which caused Nick to slap the mat in frustration. Ryan led the crowd in a chant of "Let's go, Nick," and Matthew Raywalt said Ryan can be the world's greatest cheerleader, and I was shocked there was no tongue-in-cheek reference to the Spirit Squad here. For some reason, the crowd just was on Eddie's case, and I get Eddie's a heel, but it's like they were chanting "You can't wrestle" at him, which is not something I'd ever imagined someone would chant at Eddie Edwards, and Nemeth took that as a signal to make a comeback. Nick did the 10 punches, but Myers jumped on the apron, distracting Nemeth, so Eddie pushed him over the top rope to the floor. A few minutes later, Nemeth hit a few moves and then rushed to the corner before beginning to sell exhaustion, as he took approximately 27 minutes to climb the turnbuckles and get cut off. Nemeth kicked out of a Tiger Driver and hit a super kick and an Olympic slam for a near fall. Both avoided each other's finish and laid each other out with a double clothesline. Outside the ring, Myers shoved Ryan Nemeth, so the referee went outside to break it up. Moose ran in, and saying he hit Nemeth with the TNA World Title belt is a generous phrase. He ran in and aggressively tapped Nemeth in the back with the title belt, and Edwards got the pin. So at this point, Ryan Nemeth is trying desperately to get in and save Nick because the system is in doing a 3-on-1 beatdown, and the security is, spending all their time holding back the fan, which, okay, I get it. But then the system puts a chair around Nemeth's neck, his head and neck, and then Moose hit the chair with another chair. Now that everything was done, not only does Speedball Mountain run in from the back, but Ryan is allowed to hop the guardrail and run in. I imagine this is leading to the two Nemeths versus Eddie and Brian Myers at some point. But for now, it's an all right TV main event, and the show just ended without any kind of show closing commentary. And I give that an enjoyment rating of a 4 out of 10. Number 5. The most talked about main event segment of the week, AEW Dynamite, April 24th. So I already knew what happened by the time I watched this, but before it happened, I assumed the main event was Moxley versus Powerhouse Hobbs for the IWGP title. Obviously, a world title match is less important than this. So the main event segment starts with Shivani in the ring, and he calls out Jack Perry. Jack comes out to a reasonable amount of applause, but no music, which was a nice touch. In the interest of fairness, it was a nice touch since we're pretending that he doesn't work here. The crowd sings, "Whoa, cry me a river." Jack, who again is a heel, puts over how he's had some of the best nights of his life in Jacksonville because they're, taping all week in Daly's place, and then calls out Tony Khan. TK comes out looking annoyed and honestly a little constipated. Perry says AEW has changed the world in the last 5 years, and while he's had no issues with Tony, all he's ever wanted was what's best for AEW. Perry asked Tony to shake his hand so they can continue changing the world together. We get the handshake and the hug, and Perry gave the look at the camera before punching Tony in the face to the delight of the fans. Outran Matthew, Nicholas, and Okada, who helped Tony to his knees so they could give him a BTE trigger, but Okada stopped them from actually doing that, so they gave him a Meltzer driver instead. Now, the crowd did boo, and Perry dragged Tony to the middle of the ring, which, by the way, you should not do to somebody with a neck injury, and the show ended here. So the positives of this are people genuinely reacted it, and they kept it simple. Literally, all Tony had to do was fall down one time, which, by the way, is harder than you think, and then just let the Young Bucks pick him up. The negatives are what happens from here. In reality, all 4 men would be fired, and the Young Bucks would at least have their executive title stripped of them. Even if that's not what happens, what does this build to? Tony Khan is not Vince McMahon. He is not coming back to get his revenge on the 4 of them. Plus, we already had this angle, not to this extent because they never attacked Tony, but we've already had this angle the last time the Bucks were heel, where they would just randomly beat up backstage people, and nothing ever came of that. Which I bet you forgot about. Because, it happened. It was a few years ago when they would just randomly super kick backstage geeks and throw money at them because that's the fine, quote unquote. And yeah, nothing came of it last time, and nothing is going to come of it this time. If you watched Collision, they said that Tony would be working from his home, for the time being and still running the company. And it's like motherfucker. It's like, I'm sorry. Like, Tony Khan, nice guy. Like, no, 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 no. And ultimately, like, this is going to mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. Because what does it do? What did this really do? Seriously, what does it do? Does it help the Young Bucks at all? No. Does it help Jack Perry at all? No. Because even if it did help Jack Perry, like when Steve Austin stunned Vince McMahon, Steve Austin didn't stun Vince McMahon, and then the Headbangers came out and gave Vince their finish. And I'm not insulting anybody. I'm literally the Headbangers were the first 1997 team that came to my head. Fine, the Legion of Doom. The Legion of Doom didn't then run out and give Vince McMahon, the Doomsday device. That did not happen. Steve Austin hit his stunner, and that was it. The whole thing was about Steve Austin. This was Jack Perry hits the punch to the face, which in reality, would have been fine just by itself. But then you had to have the Bucks come out and do their move. Like, legitimately, I was just waiting, for Okada to give him a fucking Rainmaker at this point. And people are making, the big deal about Tony wearing a neck brace to the NFL draft. And if you want to give him that credit for that, for selling it, fine. But, also, as many people pointed out, if you're in a neck brace, you're keeping your head and neck stable, and he's just turning his head to and fro. And as I'm doing here, as you could probably tell, because my voice dipped and kept going back in. So with that, I give it an enjoyment rating of a 4.5 out of 10. From here we go to number 4. AEW Rampage, April 27th. Daniel Garcia and Katsuyori Shibata versus Lee Moriarty and Shane Taylor with Anthony Ogogo. And I say that except Ogogo basically just sat on commentary the whole time. They made a point to say that Garcia came out in Katsuyori Shibata style gear, which is black trunks and a towel. Okay, am I like I feel like I'm forgetting something here, but isn't Daniel Garcia's normal gear black trunks? Or am I just fucking crazy here? I could swear Daniel Garcia normally just wrestles in black trunks. And now, while I'm here on the air, I might as well, look that up here. Daniel Garcia. Yeah, black trunks. Okay, so I'm not crazy. So the difference between here and normal is he had a towel. He had a towel, people. So this, by the way, this match was set up during Collision, and Tony Khan, the guy working from home, which home is in Jacksonville, booked this match. So good for him. Shibata and Garcia attacked the bell and beat both heels out of the ring. Shibata gets back in the ring and sits crisscross applesauce in the ring, as is norm. So Garcia got in the ring and did the same thing. Unfortunately, the referee was unknowingly blocking the spot, so the camera didn't really get it. I say unknowingly because he had his back turned to the whole thing while counting out Taylor and Moriarty, and I hope you heard the air quotes there, and Garcia, who could have just gone to the other side of Shibata, sat down directly behind the referee. Now, this isn't a nitpick. This is just me being an old, crusty white person. I get we can't call sitting, cross-legged, we can't call it Indian style, which is what it was called when, I was a kid, and I imagine a lot of people listening to this when they were a kid. But is there really not a better name for that than crisscross applesauce? Like, that's just ridiculously stupid. But thankfully, they never referred to that on TV, because that would have just, taken away any part of the coolness of Shibata just, doing that in the middle of the ring. So the heels got the heat when Moriarty distracted the referee while on the ropes, and Taylor tripped Garcia from the outside and DDT'd him off the apron, which was much more dangerous looking than the similar spot with Pac and Okada on the pay-per-view. Not even sure why they bothered distracting the referee, since far more egregious spots than that haven't led to DQs. Plus, I'm not entirely sure why they even did that spot, since Garcia was fighting up without much of a worry. They went to the commercial break where they pretty much got the entire heat on Garcia, and as soon as they came back, he makes the hot tag to Shibata, and a four-way breaks out with Nigel openly pointing out how long all four men are in the ring. And, again, it's pro wrestling in 2024. Nobody really cares all that much. Shibata no-sells a flurry of Moriarty strikes, so Shane Taylor hit him once, but Shibata did sell. Shibata and Garcia got on double sleepers, but Taylor got out of his, which forced the breaking of the other, and all that ultimately didn't matter because pretty much immediately Shibata pinned Moriarty with a PK kick. In the interest of fairness, this is the final match of a 3-hour live show, between Collision and Rampage. And I think, honestly, the crowd was more into this at times than the world title match from Collision, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Enjoyment rating, 5.0 out of 10. Not, nothing you're going to remember tomorrow, but a fine main event, we'll say that. Number 3. Monday Night Raw, April 22nd, 2024. So the segment starts, and this whole segment, beginning to end, was close to 40 minutes. So it's kind of like, Jesus Christ. But the segment starts with Jackie Redmond talking to Candice LaRae and Indi Hartwell about them using underhanded tactics. Candice was offended by this, and suddenly we hear screaming as Nia Jax and Liv Morgan were being held apart. Becky Lynch just happened to be walking by, noticed this, took Jackie's mic and walked to gorilla position while doing a promo. She told Maxxine Dupri to show the world why this isn't her last world title match, even though this is also her first world title match. And she told Rhea Ripley that she'll be ready when Rhea is back. Becky dropped the microphone and walked out, and we get our main event of Raw, which is the Women's World Title Battle Royal. Becky Lynch versus Liv Morgan versus Candice LeRae versus Nia Jax versus Natalya versus Zoey Stark versus Indi Hartwell versus Kayden Carter versus Katana Chance versus Shayna Baszler versus Piper Niven versus Chelsea Green versus Maxxine Dupri versus Ivy Nile. I think I got everybody. Possibly. So the match started with everybody going after Nia and Niven, who threw everyone down and began clobbering each other. That ended quickly, and we went to your run-of-the-mill Battle Royal. Maxxine eliminated Candice first, then she got booted in the yap by Indi, but Maxxine turned things around and tossed her. Poor Indi. We went to commercial, came back, and I don't think anyone was eliminated here. Kayden monkey flips Katana into each corner where she splashed a bunch of women. I gotta tell you, they are a lot less annoying when they are wrestling, because to be perfectly honest, I find their entire act really, really fucking annoying. Really fucking annoying. But they are a lot less annoying when they're actually wrestling. Go figure, right? So Shayna and Zoey teamed up to eliminate both of them, so hooray. Ivy was doing an armbar to Nia over the top rope, so Nia swung her into the post and dropped her onto the floor. Maxxine got to look good, running wild with kicks on Nia before Nia caught one and tossed her. So yes, Nia was shockingly the monster here. Becky held down the tap. Becky held down the top rope so Piper could throw herself over, which was very contrived looking. Piper then dragged Becky under the ropes, threw her into the steps, and laid her out with a cannonball. Meanwhile, in the ring, Nia was purposely no-selling everything Chelsea was throwing at her. Outside the ring, we got our strong style table that I mentioned earlier. Niven cleared the table, put Becky on it, and yanked Nia out, but Nia turned the tables and chokeslammed Niven onto Becky. The table did not break, so Nia struggled and picked up Niven to give her a Samoan drop through the table, and the table still did not break. So all the referees now had their attention turned to this. Natty throws Chelsea out of the ring, but every referee, like I said, just had their back turned. So Chelsea notices this and just got right back in. And we went to commercial. During the commercial break, the table finally, started being cooperative, and they finally broke the fucking table as Nia powerbombed Becky through it. That table honestly thought it was an aluminum trash can on a pay-per-view last weekend. Zoey finally tossed Chelsea, and Shayna tossed Natty. So we're down to Nia, Shayna, Liv, Zoey, and Becky. Nia tossed Zoey and Shayna. I could have just waited to count them down from there. Becky dragged herself back into the ring for the finish. Liv gave Nia a code breaker, while at the same time Becky gave Liv a neck breaker. Everyone got some time to shine, and the crowd, admittedly, and hey, I've been saying, I think I said this for every goddamn match, but the crowd got into this as Nia blocked a double suplex and suplexed them. She went for the Eradicator, but she got sent to the over the top to the apron, and Liv and Becky teamed up to eliminate her. At this point, I want to point out, and I don't literally no one else noticed this, but Becky throws Liv over the top rope. She lands on the apron. Becky goes through the ropes to the apron, and they fight. And I'm like, okay, so, if I'm Becky, what I do is I grab Liv in like a bear hug and just jump off the apron. She didn't go over the top rope. But everybody kind of just assumed that she went over the top rope because they just were doing commentary and acting like, hey, if Becky falls, Liv's going to win here. But that's not what should have been the case. But anyway, Liv hit a code breaker, goes for Oblivion, but Becky blocks it. She hits a manhandle slam, and Liv falls off. So Becky wins, and she celebrated in the crowd as the show ended. The match was all right, but it really picked up when we got down to 3. I am not a Nia Jax fan. I only know one person who is, but, I guess if you're going to hire her and you got to have her on the roster, you might as well use her. And, again, it came out really well there at the end. Number 2. Oh, by the way, I'm enjoyment rating 7.5 out of 10. So now back to number 2. AEW Collision, April 27th. AEW World Heavyweight Champion Swerve Strickland versus Claudio Castignoli for the AEW World title. So it's Shivani and Nigel on commentary, and Nigel talks about that clam digger Danielson, and talking about how Danielson feigned an injury, during Dynasty because he knew he couldn't beat Will Ospreay. I've got a serious question. What, what, why doesn't the BCC ever threaten Nigel? Now, I know Nigel's not a pro wrestler. He's retired. He's, doubtful he's ever going to have another match. With that said, the BCC is supposed to be this group of no-nonsense fighters who don't take shit from anybody, and they're allowing this announcer to just talk so much shit about one of their members. And this has been going on for an entire year, at least. Because, I know Nigel's been pretty much the announcer of Collision since it began, and he's been talking crap about Danielson the entire time. And I know someone's going to be like, oh, well, it makes sense because Danielson and Nigel always feuded going back to Ring of Honor. And yeah, I get that. I understand that. However, they're not going to build anything at this point, and especially times like this, there's legitimately no reason why, he'd even start talking about Danielson here anyway. But the fact is, why isn't Moxie out there with a fork threatening to carve him up? Why is Claudio not swinging him, towards the mountains? Why isn't Danielson taking his head off? It makes no sense. Anyway, so a bit of a slow start, and Claudio appeared to tweak his knee on a hurricane on a ramp, but either he tweaked it again in the opposite direction or was just selling it for like 30 seconds. With Claudio on the floor, Swerve tried going for a running kick, but Claudio blocked it, used a jumping punch to the face, and then threw Swerve into the wall, and we go to commercial. This commercial is brought to you by somebody. Somebody, a company that you should buy stuff from. Back from commercial, Swerve has basically recovered at this point. They went to the outside where Claudio again tried to throw Swerve into the wall, but Swerve ended up on the staging area and did a running moonsault to Claudio on said floor. The crowd started a bit of a half-assed "This is awesome" chant as Claudio did a double foot stomp that Swerve basically stood up from. We got the yay boo spot with European uppercuts that Swerve got the best of. He hit the Swerve stomp, but Claudio kicked out. Claudio blocked the house call and did a lengthy giant swing and locked on the sharpshooter. Not sure why the referee didn't just automatically ring the bell, but he didn't, so Claudio let it go and put on a crossface that Swerve either got out of or is still in it to this day. We actually had a nutty fucking spot here. So, and this is just going to continue the, the freakish strength of Claudio Castignoli. Not that you need me to tell you that this man is fucking strong and, just crazy strong. But, so he's standing. Swerve goes for the swerve stomp to the standing Claudio. And Claudio basically caught him on his shoulders. Claudio caught a man jumping off the top rope with his shoulders and his traps and all that fun shit up there, and then threw him in the air with the European uppercut. Swerve came back. He hit the stomp on the second try and hit the house call for the win. They did follow the code of honor afterwards, and we'll see if this leads to anything. But Claudio seemed to be telling Swerve to stay away from Nana. I gotta say, I love Claudio. I didn't think he made for a great world title challenger. With that said, this is a fantastic match. And before I get more people bitching at me, I, again, love Claudio. But he's not been pushed in a sense that somebody who should be getting a world title match would be pushed. And again, it's a throwaway match on TV. It's a fantastic throwaway match on TV. But, there's no reason for this match other than just to have it. What has Claudio done? Aren't there supposed to be rankings? When the hell was the last time they did the rankings? But the last time I checked, Claudio wasn't on the fucking rankings. But so he got a world title match anyway, right? So enjoyment rating 8.0 out of 10. And if you're following along and you've been checking off what, matches, what segments, what shows we've talked about, you know what's coming up next. But let's end the suspense here. Number one. Friday Night SmackDown, April 26th. Undisputed WWE Universal Champion Cody Rhodes versus Carmello Hayes. So, Mello, this was the night of the WWE draft, in case somehow you didn't know this. But Mello was the number 3 overall pick, the second pick for SmackDown in the first round. And he came out, and I was kind of like, this is like the entire first round. Actually, for a lot of picks for SmackDown, this whole fucking thing was random as hell. But, Bianca was number 1, which honestly, I think it will be if you can have a bust as a WWE draft pick, Bianca as the number 1 pick is a bust. But anyway, so Mello comes out and cuts a amazing promo, right out of the gate, which already made him miles ahead of Bianca. And like I said, SmackDown doesn't make a lot of good picks in this one, but this is arguably not just the best for SmackDown, but the best of the entire first night of the draft. The match was going along just fine, and then Mello hit a springboard where he jumps backwards and he DDTs Cody in one completely fluid motion. I know Cody has just as much to do with this as Mello, but that was timed just perfectly. Then Mello takes a fucking fantastic flip bump for a disaster kick. Now, you could argue that was contrived because Mello leaped in the air, and you could ask what the hell he was doing otherwise, but it was still great. Mello kicks out of a Cody cutter and hits a lung blower. They both miss their own springboard moves before Cody wins with a crossroads. Legitimately a star making performance for Carmelo Hayes on this episode. And hopefully his star making performance does more for him than Shelton Benjamin's star making performance in 2004 after he got drafted to Raw and cleanly pinned Triple H before being basically sent right back down you know, the card. This rating is purely for the main event, as an overall show would be a 10 just for Carmelo. AJ comes out and teases attacking Cody, but instead they just stared at each other, and the show ended with them shaking hands, leading to their match next week at Backlash. So for this, I give it an enjoyment rating of a 9.5. Easily the best thing on any show all week long. And that's going to do it. You know, I don't know if y'all enjoy it or not. Hopefully you did. Hopefully you listened through the entire thing. If you agree, if you disagree with the ratings, say something. You know, obviously, again, wrestling is fun, and hopefully you all enjoyed it. Hopefully this sparks a little bit of discussion. And if you like it, say something. I may do it again. But I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you again later on.